Hello, friends, and welcome to the NintenGems podcast, the podcast where we talk about Nintendo games, both new and old. I am your host, Connor, and today I am joined by the also usually host,
Braydon.
Welcome to the show, Braydon.
Hi, thanks, Connor, for having me.
No problem. Did I do a decent job of stealing your intro?
Yeah, you did actually. We are the podcast that talk about Nintendo games, both new and old.
Oh, I meant like the hello, friends. I probably need to have my own signature, like, hey guys, or what's up, y'all?
Hey, listeners, if you have a cool catchphrase for Connor to use on his next hosting gig, let us know.
Please, for the love of God.
Like an Animal Crossing villager. We need a cool catchphrase for Connor.
Right, yeah, I need a verbal tick.
Yeah, exactly.
We got some cool... We've got some interesting games, rather, to talk about today. We're a little on the hidden gem side, maybe, of the stick on this one. No Pokemon, no Zelda, no Mario's here, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
But we're both excited to talk about what we've got this time around, regardless. I'm excited. Are you excited for yours?
I really am.
So excited that you want to dive in first?
Yeah, I guess so. We'll just jump right in. I've been playing Famicom Detective Club, The Girl Who Stands Behind, which is one of Nintendo's newest digital eShop releases.
Right.
It's a visual novel series that released alongside another game, also called Famicom Detective Club, but this one is subtitled The Missing Heir. I did not play that one. They are prequel and sequel to one another, but yeah, it's been an interesting experience and is a different kind of game from, what we usually discuss, at least.
Yeah, we haven't covered any sort of visual novel-esque game. I know the Ace Attorney series might be the closest thing we would cover maybe to this kind of game. We're not necessarily visual novel kind of gamers,
right.
Being Nintendo gamers especially.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting time for Nintendo to drop a game like this, especially because it is a remake. I mean, I
think that's an okay way to phrase it, though. It is a remade version of these old games. So yeah, we're discussing Famicom Detective Club. As a whole, we may be discussing kind of both games, and as we get deeper into what my experience was, we'll just be discussing The Girl Who Stands Behind.
Mm-hmm. The first of the two. Right.
So that's the annoying part, is it was released second? Let's back up.
Yes.
Let's back up.
Please. Let's stand behind.
Let's do it. These games were originally released back on the Famicom Disk System.
What was the Famicom Disk System, Braydon?
It was the Nintendo Entertainment System precursor, but it was Japan exclusive. We never got a peek at that. Mm-hmm. It was not technology that came stateside.
So the Famicom is the Japanese version of the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System that we got. It was released in Japan a few years before we got the NES, but the Famicom Disk System is pretty distinct. It was an add-on for the Famicom. Okay. It added a disk drive, like disk as in disk, like a floppy disk, a hard disk, like the squares and the rectangle kind of guys. It added a disk drive to the Famicom for enhanced graphical fidelity, enhanced sound fidelity, extra storage. You could fit bigger files on a disc that rather than the little Famicom cartridges. Mm-hmm. So the Famicom, which was short for Family Computer, which is what it was originally called, was its own thing, but the disk system was an add-on for the Famicom that allowed you to play more advanced games. In addition to Famicom Detective Club, there were enhanced versions of Zelda and Metroid with higher fidelity music and bigger levels and such. But Famicom Detective Club as an experience, as being this kind of graphical, cinematic, I guess, experience, definitely warranted this extra sort of peripheral to it,
Right. And how did this peripheral hook up to the original Famicom? Was it fitted into the cartridge slot?
No, it went under it, I think.
More like a Game Boy Advance player, something like that?
Yeah, I in my mind, I'm imagining there's something similar for the Sega Genesis, one of the Sega CD things is similar. It kind of makes this Tower of Power looking thing.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure the apparatus itself goes under the Famicom and is just like a slot kind of that you stick the hard disks into.
Right.
Floppy disks, whatever. I'm too young. I don't understand.
Yeah. The first game, Famicom Detective Club, was released in 1988 for this said disk system. Mm-hmm. And again, this game was called The Missing Heir. That was the subtitle. It was released on 2 separate discs at 2 different times. So it was kind of a serialized story of sorts, which really added to kind of the mystery aspect of what these games were. You are solving mysteries, solving crimes. And so, just like your favorite mystery TV shows, you're going to have to tune in next month for the second part.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. These newer versions did not play into that aspect. You get the whole story, obviously, when you download the game. But then, come 1989, The Girl Who Stands Behind was released in a similar fashion, also on 2 discs, released a couple months apart from each other. And that's the game that I chose to play, in this day and age.
And The Girl Who Stands Behind, the one that came out second, is it a prequel?
Correct.
That's confusing.
All of that said, yes. I played the prequel game that is technically the sequel,
Right. So back in the 1980s on the Famicom Disk System, back in the day, The Missing Heir was released first, and that was Famicom Detective Club. And then, a year later, a second episode, The Girl Who Stands Behind, was released, but that was a prequel to the first.
That's correct.
But today, fast forward 2021, both of those the remade versions released at the same time.
Exactly.
So there's not necessarily a reason to play them in like quote unquote release order, right? Like you might as well play the prequel, which is technically, I don't know, the one that came after first, just for story purposes, I would assume.
That was my take on it. I wanted to kind of just start from the beginning, really build it up. But it turns out, like, if I were to have played The Missing Heir first, there would be some, like, good payoffs.
Yeah. I'm sort of a stickler about that. I tend to like the Metal Gear Solid series. Like, there's prequels on prequels, but, like, playing them in release order is kind of like the best way to experience the story,
Yes, and it is kind of cheating to do that, or something,
I mean,
that's
whatever.
That's not the exact right word for it.
Or like the Star Wars prequels.
Yeah, but see, I'm trying to avoid pain like that. You know what I mean? I'm going to play, like, in the order that makes the most sense. I have a phobia for, like, retconning and stuff.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that really kind of rubs me the wrong way. And so I try to find the way to experience stories, hopefully the way that will, like, relieve...
Yeah, the most, like, logically...
sound, perhaps?
Sure.
Yeah.
Cause and effect.
Yeah.
At play. I think I understand.
Yeah, I don't think I needed to take it that seriously for these 2 games.
Sure.
I should have probably just started with the first one. Because, like I said, there were some cool character tie-ins that I know were going to pay off later on, if I went back to play that first game sequel thing.
Right.
If it's not clear by now, they are meant to be played together, essentially.
Sure.
You can buy them as a bundle. They are only about 10 hours long. And so they're very digestible games by themselves, And so, like, calling them a duology, I think, is a fair thing, the way that I've seen it phrased before, that they were released together and intended to be experienced together.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it feels like the kind of thing these days that they would just kind of come bundled together. Like, if they're intended to be such, like, A and B experiences, like side A, side B.
Right.
To the same kind of thing. Like, I figured it would be like one package, like the Famicom Detective Club collection, and I mean, I guess you play them in whatever order.
Right.
What is, if you had to define it for me, a visual novel? What are we talking about? What kind of video game is this? And dare I ask, would you call it a video game?
Wow, that was... You
is that too big a question for so soon?
No, because we definitely need to define visual novel before we discuss this game any further, because that's really what it is.
Sure, and that's visual novel being like the genre, for those of you playing at home, visual novel is the genre classification for this kind of game generally. To be fair, like, this kind of game was not called a visual novel back in the 80s.
Right,
This was pretty revolutionary, I guess. I would say. This kind of experience was typically reserved for PC games, games on the computer. They're just kind of like, storytelling experiences. There's
right, very character heavy, very text heavy.
Yeah, it's truly visual novel. Like it's a story that you experience, and there are graphical and sometimes interactive elements.
Mm-hmm.
Using the video part of video games to their fullest potential, and sometimes the game part, sometimes you can make decisions like a choose your own adventure book to affect the plot.
Exactly. That, I would say, like, it's the video game equivalent of a choose your own adventure book of
Right.
sorts,
For sure.
Along with ways to die,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that you can fail sometimes.
Right, not in this particular game series, but
Mm-hmm.
plenty of visual novels just will lead to failure if you take the wrong path.
Right. And there's some debate in the larger gaming community as to like whether visual novels are a valid genre of game, because not all of them do have failure states. Not all of them have a kind of challenge or a choice
or
system.
Or even gameplay mechanics.
Right, yeah, you just kind of press enter and read all the texts and
Mm-hmm.
watch all the little cutscenes, and that's kind of it.
Right, you go through the dialogue tree, you read all the conversations, and then you kind of move on to the next screen.
Mm-hmm. And then...
So is that a game?
Well, yeah, and if you start adding too much game, like if you have like an inventory and there's puzzles to solve, well, then you're basically just an adventure game.
Right.
And then that's your genre.
Mm-hmm.
Visual novel really exists at this weird precipice between like game or not.
Yeah.
But all that being said, Famicom Detective Club was pretty revolutionary for its time, just being one of those kinds of experiences on a console, especially a Nintendo developed one.
Right.
And so how does that kind of fit into today's gaming landscape? Would you call it a game? Do you like visual novels now?
So it's funny because going through this game, I realized that I think I have played visual novels before and liked them, and I wouldn't have realized it.
Okay.
Because, like you said, I have played the Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney games, starting back from the original on the DS, and I played those games and enjoyed them and considered them games.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, I knew along the way I was reading a whole lot, and you know what I mean? Like, I was like, this is a story, you know what I mean? And so I revisited a lot of those feelings going through Famicom Detective Club, because it clearly laid the groundwork for Phoenix Wright, and some Professor Layton vibes in there.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
The gameplay comes in after a conversation. So basically you're face to face with a character, or you are in front of a landscape, and you have a couple options. You have the option to call or engage them, whether the person's like nearby or off in the distance, you'll get their attention. You have the option to talk to them, and then you have a couple options of dialogue. You have the option to look around or examine your surroundings, which when you do so, a little reticle appears on the screen, which you direct to an area of the landscape or the room you're in, and you get to investigate different objects around you, or people, or buildings. You know, it's a point and click type experience that they start to weave into this visual novel.
Right. That's kind of, it sound like that's pretty standard adventure game fare, kind of. Like, it reminds me of like text adventures that have like little command prompts.
Exactly. Yes, they saved you from having to type in those prompts. They just gave you a menu to select them from.
Oh, I know what we're skipping over something extremely important. Hamtaro Hem Hem Heartbreak is absolutely a similar kind of adventure game.
You think?
I think so. Because you use like the ham chat words as your different commands.
You're right. But there are puzzles, and there are...
Well, okay. Are there puzzles in Famicom Detective Club? Like, does it kind of stop at like the dialogue trees and such, and the investigating the scenery?
Yes. There are a couple good. So let me finish the options.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. But you can look around, point and click, different spots, and you'll learn about the stuff. Then you can show the person objects you've collected. So you do have an inventory, but that's a very loose term. In my gameplay experience, I picked up 2 items. And I don't even know if I used one of them. I don't know. Then you have Think, which is kind of it'll drop you a hint maybe. It'll give you a little more context of maybe what you should do. But most importantly, if it just gives you a ... it means you have more options that you need to go through. You have more conversations you need to have. you haven't found all the information out.
Okay.
Finally, there's quit investigation. That's how you quit the game. You save, you're out.
Interesting. Is it pretty linear? Like, there's not much like exploration or anything?
It is very linear. Yeah.
It sounds like especially like with the hint system, as it were. It could guide you to like the solution for each little room or situation you're in pretty swiftly, right?
Right. It never actually told me what to do, but it does let you know, like, you probably just need to go through the talk dialogue once or twice more, because it is kind of like that. Like, you have to ask the same person the same thing a couple times for them to get through all the information. Whereas, like, modern games, you ask them to discuss the town once, and they'll tell you everything they know.
Sure.
But in this game, you have to ask them to discuss the town, and they'll be like, I was born here. And then you ask them to discuss the town again, and they're like, so-and-so was born here as well. And then you have to ask them to discuss the town again. And the town was founded in whatever. So it's...
Does it feel archaic in that regard? Like, does it, like, how many, like, modern trappings do you think, does it feel like they added? I know we haven't done much hard research on, like, what all is different between the original. But, like, does it feel retro? Besides the updated visuals and such?
It does. It really does.
Interesting.
The visuals are gorgeous. The animations are not quite like anime level, fluid animations, but they look great, and it's very bright and colorful and dreary and creepy when it needs to be. But even the menus, yes, to answer your question, the menus move kind of slowly. One small thing that I can only think is just like true to the original is, how some menus will let you, when you press up at the top option, it'll go to the bottom option?
Yeah.
It didn't do that. And
interesting. Okay.
But it was also very slow to scroll through all the options. Like, it just felt
authentic. Like, do you think like it was an intentional, like,
maybe that was my hope, at least. You know what I mean? Otherwise it was kind of just like clunky game design.
I mean, sure.
But at the rate that the rest of the game felt authentic to what they originally were telling, back on the Famicom disk system, like, it made sense. It connected for me.
Sure. That's interesting.
As a deliberate decision,
Right. I mean, yeah, I guess too much modernization for a genre as fragile as visual novels would just kind of turn it into just like a press A to scroll to the text kind of experience, I guess.
For sure.
Making it too convenient. Then, so if gameplay is not quite the matter of discussion here, how is the plot? How is the meat of it? It's not about people investigating Famicoms, correct?
No, that's correct.
That's not the mystery at hand?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I actually do know where, like, the Detective Club part comes from. You play as a young male detective, which I don't believe you have the option to be female. Like, you're just male. And then your counterpart is a young female named Ayumi, and she is the president of the Detective Club in the school. And so that kind of is a running theme. Just you're these high schoolers as part of the Detective Club. And so, therefore, it was on the Famicom Detective Club. I think that's the origin.
Fair enough.
As for the plot, I was pretty pleasantly surprised, because when I watched the trailer, I got some vibes that there would be supernatural elements, like overt supernatural elements.
Really?
And yes, and I was kind of afraid going into it that it would lean that way pretty heavily. And maybe the missing heir does, but the girl who stands behind ended up being a pretty, I don't know, forensically sound, mystery, detective case, crime to be solved, with some rumors and stories of ghosts and stuff that, surround it all, but it all made pretty decent sense. It felt like an episode of Forensic Files, that I was playing through. It was kind of cool.
Pretty mature for something that was like Nintendo developed and published, like back in the day, or for even now.
Yeah, but it has some pretty mature themes. Obviously, murder is heavy, and it doesn't stray from like the horror themes as well. One of the final cutscenes is pretty like shocking and intense, and I was pleasantly surprised there. I don't know, it's just an interesting blend of storytelling
can you like briefly summarize the premise of the mystery without giving away too much, if possible? Like,
Yeah, actually.
who is the girl who stands behind? What is going on?
The story begins when Ayumi's best friend, who is also in the detective club, she is found murdered on the side of a river. Check our Instagram. We have some screenshots of that first sequence where, you're kind of checking out the crime scene.
Neato.
Yeah, good stuff. But from there, you find out her being the detective she is, the murdered girl. She was digging a little bit too deep into some past cases, one being the girl who stands behind, which is an old ghost story that's told at their high school, and she was trying to solve it, figure out what the truth was behind it, and she winds up dead. And thus begins the game.
Interesting.
It's all very straightforward. It's an 8 to 10 hour episode of Forensic Files that you can't lose.
Agatha Christie murder mystery kind of deal, right?
Yeah, it's lots of different characters that you're going around interviewing, investigating.
What is the setting? Is it like it's modern-ish Japan, right?
It is, yeah.
Like small town, city, countryside?
Yeah, I'd say small city. A lot of it's spent in a school building or on a school campus, different buildings and things like that. I obviously can't speak to The Missing Heir. It may have a totally different vibe.
Sure.
That was also part of the reason I avoided it, was because I thought it was going to have like more supernatural elements.
Huh.
And I may totally be wrong, but that was part of my decision-making process as well.
Right. I mean, it sounds like both of them are kind of like Scooby-Doo level stuff where maybe supernatural, there's a ghost at hand, but I don't know, it's a real, I don't know, CEO of a corporation that's trying to scare off kids from their warehouse or whatever,
Yeah, sorta.
But with more murder.
More murder, yeah, exactly. I'd have to say, in the end, the gameplay elements did just kind of feel like a means to an end to get you through the story. In the end, it boils down to a visual novel more than the adventure game that we were discussing, kind of.
Sure, and that's like that's the other side of the coin with visual novels. If like they're not going to justify being a game, too much, then sometimes like adversity, like too much challenge or too much to like scroll through to get to the plot, the good part of it can like get in the way of a good plot. It's
right.
Interesting.
It's almost a spoiler, but I think it's one small aspect of the gameplay that is almost insignificant to the game, but it took me by surprise. You know what I mean? Like I was pleasantly surprised. You are being threatened by a character, and he's mad that you are looking into him, and you actually have to hit quit investigation.
Oh,
it's a little meta. It's a little...
But that's how you make it a game. That's how you like use the mechanics properly, I guess.
Right. It twists my brain a little bit. I don't know if I like it. I don't know if I think it's good game design or bad game design. But it took me by surprise. It was something new and felt right for the story. So,
right. I mean, if it's moments like that justify it being a game, though. I don't know. Same thing for like Professor Layton. Sometimes, like all the puzzles are just like in a vacuum, a puzzle that you solve. You solve so many puzzles, check so many boxes to get the plot moving forward. But sometimes there's one that is like plot intensive or like key to it. That,
right?
Like, makes it, I don't know, move forward a little bit or more organically. That's not a great example my own self, but yes, the games that like justify themselves as games by subverting their own genre.
Yes,
those are memorable moments and make the whole experience usually worthwhile.
Things like that happened a couple times. That's the big example that I'll bring to the show. But I think that's probably why I'm stepping away from the game with a positive reaction to it. It didn't feel like time wasted. It was entertaining. I don't play many visual novels, so maybe there was some like novelty to that.
Sure.
If I played more, maybe it wouldn't be as great. It might have been underwhelming compared to the rest of the visual novel genre. But I had a good time, and I have to appreciate Nintendo dredging up kind of this long lost Japanese only game.
A relic. Really.
Yes. Yeah.
But, I mean, the fact that it feels so... I mean, again, we're not visual novel enthusiasts, but like it can still feel so fresh and still fit right in. As far as I can tell, with other visual novels, like in up to the same standard, and like still feel, even as like a retro game, like what, regardless of genre, still feel worth playing today, and like like it's still enjoyable. Like that's still saying something, because it is a bit of a relic. It was almost forgotten, sort of, but it is also like has quite a legacy. Like there is a trophy for Ayumi has a trophy in Super Smash Bros. Melee way back in the day, so there's like some relevance there. I think they have some spirits in Smash Ultimate too.
It's true. Yeah,
so it's another one of those Nintendo properties that truly isn't like all the way forgotten, but might not have just like gotten its due diligence in the meantime. But
especially in the West. I mean, if you've never heard of it before 2021, like me, you know what I mean? You are totally justified, you know, to be there.
And the guts kind of to introduce it to the West as Famicom Detective Club still is an interesting choice. They could have westernized it, localized it a little more organically, but I'm kind of glad they didn't. Whether it makes it confusing or not, I don't know. We were discussing earlier a little bit before recording that it's just a weird time for them to do this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But visual novels are at an all-time high popularity, so like I don't know, why not? I guess
somebody got bored in quarantine and going through the oldies,
just through the filing cabinets in Nintendo's headquarters.
Yeah.
What about this game? I don't know.
We touched on it, and I don't want to dive right back into it, but just how derivative that has a negative connotation to it, derivative. But the Ace Attorney series really is. Those are games. Those have exploration, different areas that you can visit at any time. You know what I mean? Like there's definitely more to it that make the Ace Attorney games more game-like. But holy cow, if I wasn't just playing the 80s version of Phoenix Wright. Yeah. It's crazy.
I don't know, man. I'm the resident games as art guy here, and I don't know, games... interactive experiences, win states, fail states, what makes a game, winning, losing, challenge. Who's to say, really? I think our vocabulary is just inherently limited. I think it's all semantical.
We should be robots.
We are robots.
Then we'll truly understand video games.
Possibly. I can't wait for my consciousness to be uploaded into my Nintendo Switch so that I can meet Mario finally.
My hero. Yeah. That's kind of all I have for Famicom Detective Club. I wanted to touch base on it, get my thoughts out.
And you have Missing Air, right? The other part?
I don't, actually.
Do you intend to play it now?
I'm not sure. I paid $34.99 for The Girl Who Stands Behind. The Missing Air is also $34.99, but if you buy them as a bundle, you get $10 off. And actually, that offer stands true even if you don't buy it as a bundle. If I go back and buy The Missing Air now, I'll get $10 off of it. So
it's 60.
60 for both.
Okay.
If you only want one, it's $35 in tax.
It's consistent with Nintendo pricing rationale. I can't. Can you speak to whether it's worth it or not? Who do you recommend it for? Do you recommend it?
Again, it was just such a, I hate saying novel experience.
I mean, but I feel like if any game warrants the term.
Yeah, but just for me, having not played any kind of text-heavy games like that in a long time, besides maybe like Catherine.
Oh yeah,
sort of.
I would say Catherine is comparable.
Yeah, but even it has that whole puzzle sequence. You know, it's regardless. I hadn't played anything similar in a long time, and so the money felt worth it. It felt like a good long movie, like a good long book. But plenty of people would not enjoy it. I think bottom line, buying the double pack is like a good deal. I think $60 for both. That's probably an okay deal. Considering the work that it went into them, reviving them from the dead, the art is great, and they are enjoyable experiences.
And maybe...
There, gavel down.
Pow. Pow. Easy peasy. And maybe if it gains popularity, we'll get even more Famicom Detective Club franchise in the future.
Maybe.
Representation.
That'd be cool, like new original games in the series.
Yeah.
Because there is that third game, but it's like this weird like sequel spin-off thing for Satellaview.
Ooh. We'll touch on Satellaview someday. That's a whole different Nintendo peripheral beast.
I don't. It scares me, dude.
It's awesome. It's so cool.
But
a different day.
Yeah, and so that's obviously part of the reason they didn't even remake that. That's just an entirely different experience to be had altogether. But yeah, if they brought back the series as like a Phoenix Wright competitor almost, I could see it happening. That'd be cool.
That would be cool. Yeah, maybe. What's next, Braydon? What are you excited to talk about next? What are we gonna talk about?
All right, look, I'm gonna break it down for the audience. Don't you shush your mouth.
Can't wait to break it down for the audience.
I had this great idea, guys. I played the girl who stands behind, right? I told Connor, you're the artsy fartsy guy. Go back. Don't emulate because that's wrong, but maybe find a way to play a translated version of The Missing Heir for Famicom. Like, find a way.
This sounds pretty tricky so far.
I think you could have done it, but you didn't. And we could have had a great Famicom Detective Club episode, talk about how it plays, for the original, the modern. But Connor said, no, I'm playing this great game that me and my roommate got called Soul Divide. And I said, all right, it must be pretty good. So I'll let you take it from there, man. I don't know. What are we doing? Soul Divide? What's that?
There's a lot I need to touch on. First of all, I am a busy man. Not to get too personal on my podcast, but I have 2 jobs. I quit one of them. I'm starting another. I've got my music. I've got other extracurriculars. My personal life is jam-packed with things that I value. And so sometimes it's hard to justify sitting down, diving in headfirst to an archaic retro game that requires my attention and my engagement, and sometimes I just want to pull out my Switch, play something light. I want to play a few rounds of Smash Online. I want to play Soul Divide. There's some hoops that one needs to jump through, and not that I'm not willing to jump through hoops for the sake of my poor brother or our poor audience, for the sake of a good quality episode. Mm-hmm. But needless to say, the stars didn't quite align for this one, and I do formally apologize to everyone involved that I might have been inconvenienced in this matter. However, here we are.
We got a gem.
We have a hell of a gem for you folks now. I am going to start by reading from the Nintendo eShop. This is an excerpt. And by excerpt, I mean this is the entire eShop blurb for Soul Divide, Sword of Darkness. Audience and Braydon, tell me if this doesn't make you want to download this game right now and just rip through the whole thing.
I'm excited.
All right. Vorg heard a rumor that the army of Satan was searching for treasures called Seire Stones, which led him to think that the time for revenge has come. The tale of magic, sword, and vengeance starts now. Any questions?
Was that from the Bible?
Just about. There's a lot. So Soul Divide, let me spell that for you. S-O-L space divide, not like a soul like in your heart.
Right.
Soul Divide, Sword of Darkness is a shoot 'em up, I guess you could call it, like a scrolling shoot 'em up, which is not really a genre we've touched on in the podcast. But it was originally released in the arcade, as shoot 'em ups are commonly, by Psychio, who are actually pretty prolific shoot 'em up developer. They made Cannon Spike and Strikers 1945. Mm-hmm. What's a Gunbird? All games that Braydon loves and is extremely familiar with.
I love arcade games.
Comparable to Cave and Toplon, kind of household names.
Yeah, naturally,
for sure. All my retro heads know where I'm at.
He's smirking so smugly right now.
It's delicious. I am lapping the tears off of Braydon's face right now. But anyway, so Soul Divide is another shoot 'em up from Psychio. But while Gunbird, Cannon Spike, and all those above are held in relatively high regard, Soul Divide is not. It is one of the less popular, less well-known, and less revered for decent reason.
Good.
But it is just so weird and unique and interesting and dumbfounding in a lot of ways that is just worth pulling up from the dredges and talking about, and forcing you to talk to me about it, and forcing the audience to listen to me talk about it.
Yeah.
Any questions so far?
Why is this like their failed project? Psycho.
Because it sucks, kind of. So it's a shoot 'em up. It's actually like the problem is that like the gameplay conceptually is really cool, and playing it is really fun. It's a shoot 'em up. For those of you playing at home that are not familiar, a shoot 'em up traditionally is the kind of game that you see in arcades, where you play as a spaceship that's like shooting down enemies. You are like typically scrolling. The screen is scrolling upwards or to the right, and you're shooting down other ships. And there's bullets all over the screen. That kind of thing. The Galagas, but also like the Tyrians, the Gradiuses, those kinds of things. You'd know it if you saw it. I assume I don't.
And you've played them a dozen times,
right? Exactly. And this is one of those, but instead of a spaceship, you are like a floating guy.
Yeah, kind of Contra looking almost, but from a different perspective, right?
Kind of. It's so if you couldn't tell from the eShop blurb, which just is so great at selling the game. I feel like really made me just like want to mash the purchase button when I saw it. It's fantasy. It's all fantasy. It's like high fantasy, like D&D fantasy. You can choose from one of 3 characters, which is cool because like most shoot 'em ups, you just play as one ship. You can play as Kashon, who is this purple guy who wields a spear.
Cool.
Vorg, who I've mentioned.
Yeah.
Who is this? Yeah, he's the Dark Knight from Silverna. He wields a sword.
Sick.
Or Tiora, who is a wizard. And they each have like their own strengths and weaknesses. So it's a little innovative in that regard. You know, you don't often get more than one character to play as in shoot 'em ups. Yeah. But you play as like these like big ass characters that are like floating around the screen, like all of the enemies typically are also like big sprites.
They take up large amounts of the screen. Like your character, I don't know what.
If you a quarter of the screen height wise, at least.
Yeah, break the screen up into like columns or something. I don't know. He takes up like a 1/6 or 7th of the screen. You know, like it's crazy.
And it sounds like nickel and diming, but like when you think about traditional shoot 'em ups, like you play as like this bite-sized ship that's zipping around like a screen full of bullets, you know,
right?
With larger than life bosses and such. So for the character sprites to be so big is pretty uncommon, and all the enemies are the same way. Like you're fighting other humans, wizards, skeletons. The bosses are larger than life. They're like these huge, cool monsters. It's funny that we're doing this right after Donkey Kong Country because it's the same thing.
I was gonna ask, man.
It's like it looks like a cross between Donkey Kong Country and Mortal Kombat.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the same kind of digitized CG rendering that we talked about last episode. 3D models turned into sprites, compressed and pixelized.
And to me, my brain always goes back to like it's like sprite stop motion almost.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean,
which is all animation is. But.
Right. Like the character sprites are like relatively detailed. Like they look pretty cool, but the big monsters, like the boss monsters, are very detailed, and they kind of do look like claymation. You know, it's hard to say objectively that it looks good. I feel like it's a bit more heretical to say that Donkey Kong Country might not look good. Yeah, that it hasn't aged super well, but you would be fine. No one would hurt you for saying that Soul Divide does not look good anymore, considering the visual style. I think it looks cool. I really like that almost like uncanny look that like the 90s CG sort of rendering has.
I came into your house and you were playing it before we started recording. And I have to say, like, I feel like that style of sprites, that animation style, fits a more realistic style of graphics.
Right.
Donkey Kong Country felt a little weird to me, like, because it is supposed to be, like, cartoony, and it's not going for any realism at all, necessarily, whereas this, like, they would have made them as realistic looking as possible if they could.
Right.
And I feel like it fits better.
I am inclined to agree, only because my opinions on the matter are nuanced, and it's kind of a rabbit trail, but given the era, like the newness of 3D rendering technology, I feel like everything was kind of trying to look a little too realistic. because everything that was trying to look realistic didn't look realistic, like by today's standards. I don't know. It's like this weird line of like, I don't think like the fidelity to which they could make things look realistic at all is not what it is today.
Sure.
You know, so whether they were trying to make Donkey Kong Country look realistic, but it looks cartoony, or vice versa, or for this, like, I don't know.
Yeah,
I know what you mean, I think. And I think I agree that, like, this pre-rendered style, the 3D models and such, like, the grittier kind of fantasy, it's almost like gothic fantasy, too.
Yeah.
It does suit this kind of setting a little better.
I think you got your words around it a little better than I did. It is a weird topic that we aren't nailing very effectively,
very gracefully. But yes, so visually it's interesting. The music is nothing to like super write home about. It's just kind of like normal MIDI fantasy stuff you'd hear on like maybe the Super Nintendo as well. It's also, because it's an arcade game, you probably wouldn't hear much of the music anyway over the music of all the other games in the arcade. There's also digitized voice samples all over the place, which is kind of cool.
Saying real words?
Kinda, sometimes. There's, if
is it?
Yes, a lot of that. A lot of grunts and yells. But if you couldn't tell from the eShop blurb, it is very plot heavy.
Shut up.
It's
I kind of want to sit on this topic for a second. You can say what you want to say, but
it's hard to know what to say because, like, the fact there's just this massive disconnect. This is not an uncommon thing for games of this era and games of this level of like obscurity to be like mismarketed like this, but there's this like fascinating disconnect to me that the entire eShop blurb is about like the plot, and the plot is so insignificant. It's significant in the game, but it just like is equally as incomprehensible in the game as it is in the blurb.
Right.
Playing the game does not make the blurb make any more sense, and vice versa.
Sure.
So there is a plot, and there's like dialogue in between some of the levels. So the ending is actually surprising too. But go on. What are you thinking?
But I mean, so you called it high fantasy and derivative of D&D. Is it drawn from anything at all? Is it a Warhammer relative somehow? You know, because there's plenty of weird Warhammer games that are just called Soul Divide, but then there's the tiny little banner underneath Warhammer 40K and whatever. That's a dumb example. But
and D&D, like
same thing.
Baldur's Gate, Tool of the Planeswalker, or that's something different. But yes, I know what you mean.
So Vorg, we should not know who he is from any other media or franchise or anything.
That's kind of what I'm saying is like they're no.
Okay.
Not that I can tell. I did some research, and nothing that I could tell was like this is an extended part of like the Dungeons and Dragons universe or Warhammer or I don't know, like Magic the Gathering. Like there's no, as far as I'm aware, there's no prior mythology that one could be familiar with to make this make more sense. Maybe I don't know. Maybe there's some obscure novel series, but nothing that I read about this game made it sound like it's part of something else, a greater work.
Okay.
Which is where that like disconnect comes from, like the fact that like the eShop blurb is so intent on getting the story through to you, even though it just doesn't. It is just nothing. It's nonsense.
And so it was originally an arcade game.
Correct.
In our discussions, we've covered that it was released for the PlayStation 1 and had a couple little extra features, which we can... But even if it was a PlayStation 1 game, or go back to an NES game. Say this game was released for the NES, as a side-scrolling shooter with a story. They would have put that story in the instruction manual.
Right.
Correct?
Correct.
If you're at an arcade, what the heck, dude? Like, I
think it would have been on the cabinet itself, along with like some game instructions. There are also like cutscenes. I don't know, man. Like
you can't justify it.
Yeah, because like here we are in the 21st century, and they had the chance to make it make sense and to make it engaging with this eShop blurb.
Sure.
You can read the manual on this eShop version of the game.
Okay, yeah.
The Switch version has like a digital manual that like tells you how to play the game and stuff, which would have been on the cabinet, and like arcade flyers were also a thing back in the day, and posters. But like now with a modern digital release, yes, this was their chance to, I don't know, make it make sense, make it engaging, but like no, like it's just like I don't know. Nobody cares. There's no point. It's not what it's about. It's kind of what it's about. I think it's beautiful that it is just nonsense and it just drops you in. I think that's what makes it funnier and more interesting to me. I love that kind of stuff. Oh, it's cool. This is a port, a direct port of the arcade version.
Right.
The Switch kind of has, like, the Switch eShop kind of has, like, now this extensive library of, like, pretty faithful arcade ports of, like, a lot of games.
Yeah, that's cool.
Even beyond, like, the Psycho stuff, like, from a lot of different arcade games that were unavailable up to this point on, like, any console. And this is one of those. It has, like, a lot of different options. You can change the difficulty. You can change a lot of the visual filters. You can
that's cool.
Add as many credits as you want to give yourself a challenge.
Right.
But yeah, so it's a direct port of the arcade version, and so the gameplay it's a shoot 'em up. You're playing as these big characters on the screen. It's all fantasy, so you're not shooting bullets. You're throwing spears and knives and stuff.
Yeah.
One character throws spears, one throws knives, the other uses like magic blasts. And you also have this melee attack. In addition to shooting, you can also like hit enemies with a melee attack.
Get up close.
Yeah, and it's really satisfying. It's not that alone is something that is very unique to this game that a lot of shoot 'em ups don't have.
Right.
It makes it feel it's just really satisfying to beat the enemies.
A little more action oriented or something than just keeping your distance and avoiding at all costs.
Right, and it makes the whole thing feel very like beat 'em up esque in a way too.
Sure.
In addition to like the 3 different playable characters, and like you also have these magical spells that are like kind of screen clearing blasts of whatever. It feels a lot like Golden Axe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Which is a good game.
It is a good game. That's a Sega Genesis classic for those of you not in the know. If you've got the quarters, you can drop in co-op, or if you're playing on Switch, you can just press A, you know? It feels very old school beat 'em up esque in a lot of its sensibilities.
Yeah.
And the 3 characters, they play a little differently. The magic girl, her magical bullets are stronger than her melee attack, and then the sword guy, his melee attack is more powerful, and his range attack is not as powerful.
Yeah.
Each character also has like I mentioned, there's magical spells. Enemies, when you defeat them, can drop health. They can drop items that increase your maximum health. They can drop things that refill your magic meter, or they can drop additional spells for your magic. Your magic attacks are just different, like screen clearing things.
Are they all screen clearers?
No,
because you had like a dozen different spells up there, and I only saw you use like 2.
Yeah, you collect like a good amount through the game, through like a playthrough, like and they are collected from fallen enemies. There's like a flamethrower that just like shoots a straight streak of flame in front of you. There's a screen clearing thunder attack. There's an ice attack that freezes all the enemies. There's a slow attack that you shoot at an enemy and it slows their movements in addition to their attacks. Yeah. There's one that makes you invulnerable. There's a lot of variety. And like and alone already, like this is just a very cool port of a game, and a cool game already in that it's a shoot 'em up that it has so much replay value. Yeah. With all the characters, all the different spells and stuff, you know, the different difficulty settings.
Well, and like that sounds really underwhelming for just like any game that would come out for a console or something, but for an arcade to have so many different spells and attacks to use, and yeah, truly different actual replayability.
Right, and especially if you were playing it in an arcade, like you would want to keep going back and playing it with a friend to like play as a different character or like try something different. There's also splitting paths. It's a shoot 'em up. It's linear. It's level by level, but depending on which character you choose, the first level is different. And also there's a point or two where you can choose a different level to go to, like a branching path sort of. It's not too significant. It basically is almost the same thing, but it's cool in theory.
Yeah, basically Sonic Adventure 2.
Oh yeah, man. Also, but like Golden Axe-esque again, you know, too. Yeah. Oh, and each magic attack takes a certain amount of your magic meter, depending on how powerful it is. Each character also has a few unique magic attacks, unique to them. It's a cool game. Conceptually, it's a cool game, and it's fun to play. That's about where the good ends, unfortunately, because each level is like a minute and a half long, and the whole game is like 10 minutes long.
Dang.
Like
which is good for arcade players. Cost you like $1.
Yeah, true. And the default setting, the normal difficulty, and the default amount of credits the Switch version gives you, it does offer some challenge. Like if you were playing it in the arcade version, at least for me, in my skill level, I don't know, I would have to put in a quarter or two to keep it going to see the end. And obviously you can alter the difficulty a little bit to make it lengthier and make it a little more challenging. But yeah, it is, even by shoot 'em up standards, it is a short game.
Interesting.
It's like 8 levels maybe. The levels themselves are just like, I would say maybe a dozen enemies total. Like a dozen.
That's bizarre.
It's interesting.
So it's not one hit kill enemies. Like you will have to punch your enemies a couple times and throw a spear and then zap them with your spell. And
that also is very beat 'em up-esque. You know, because like traditionally in these old shoot 'em ups, you know, you are just like spraying bullets and like it's like
they blow up.
Yeah, and it's these also like tiny targets that are zipping around the screen, and you're avoiding their tiny bullets. You know, but yeah, it's no more than a half dozen enemies on screen at once, and they are just kind of like floating around, and you have to shoot bullets at them and bash them with your melee weapon like a lot for them to die. And yeah, there's like a couple clusters of those kinds of enemies per level, and then you fight a boss, maybe, and then you move on. And there's like maybe 8 of those. And the gameplay is fun, and again, like it warrants a lot of replay value to keep you playing, but it's just interesting that they didn't pad it out more than they did.
What year did this originally come out? I don't think we said so yet. I'm curious where the industry standards were at that point, you know? And what Psycheo had done before, because like you said, you know, those are some games that I recognize the name of, and whether those came out before or after.
So Soul Divide came out in 1997, which, yeah, they should have known better. There was certainly, even from themselves, like Gunbird, Strikers 1945, and Sengoku Blade were already all out at that point. Yeah, I don't know. And again, this is one of their less revered titles. I think it's a NintenGem because it's so unique and different and interesting. And I think hidden gems are hidden oftentimes for a reason. I think they are niche. I think they're for certain kinds of gamers to appreciate them. And I think they're flawed typically. Sure. Like they're missing something, but they have some sort of novel idea that makes them notable. That makes them a
quality,
gem. Yeah. Something that makes them, like, because there's shovelware, there's stuff that's not worth playing at all.
Of course.
And then there's hidden gems that have some sort of notable factor. And I think Soul Divide has something there.
I hate to say it, but like even the 10-minute playthrough that I saw you go through, I have to agree. Like there was something captivating to it. Like,
it's interesting.
Yeah. And
again, like plot-wise, I don't know, the ending for all the shit that we talked about the story, the ending was actually shocking. It was, I mean, not to spoil it for whatever listeners.
The 10-minute playthrough.
Yeah, but I was playing co-op with my roommate, and one of our player characters killed and betrayed the other one.
Oh, snap.
It was kind of cool and sad.
And now...
Don't ask me why. I don't know.
But I'm going to trap you here.
Okay.
Was that story beat based on the 2 characters that you were playing as?
Yes.
No way.
Yeah, it was Kashon and Vorg, and Vorg betrayed Kashon for some reason.
But if you were playing solo as Vorg?
Don't know.
Question mark?
Not sure. Or if Tiora, the girl?
Yeah, right.
I don't know. Guess we'll have to replay value, man. I'm telling you.
Oh, wow.
They did some things right. I think they did.
Wow, all of a sudden I'm invested in this world. They just gotta start with the ending, apparently.
I can't wait to scour the wiki for all of the plot details. Spoiler alert, there's no plot details on like the Wikipedia page. It is barren.
There's no context.
I tried.
That's so funny.
Yeah, so I mean that's mostly all there is to it. It's a tiny game, but it's cool and interesting. It's like $8 or $9 on the eShop. Might not be worth it to you, whatever, but it's like definitely like an afternoon of fun.
All right. Before we hop off though, I'm not past the story here.
Sure, and I'm not past
talking about it.
Yeah, right. Finalizing the game, but like, yeah, what?
So we're gonna break the NintenGems wall here and go into the Sony Gems.
Right. Yes, this is where I was going.
Vein. Okay, you weren't done yet.
Right.
Because tell me about the PS1 version because it's different.
A little bit. It was originally an arcade game, but it did get a few home ports. It got a native port to the PS1 that had like a few extras. I think the intro it got like kind of like a more CG intro. I don't know, maybe it provided more story. Who's to say?
Well, that's what I want to read the back of the jewel case or something.
Oh, true. I mean, if you can find scans for it, by all means, fill me in. Yeah, and the PS1, this is something that is unfortunate, actually, because the PlayStation 1 version isn't quite a direct port. It's direct enough, but they actually added an extra mode that is like a little more RPG-esque. It's like it's different from like the normal linear arcade mode. You like ascend a tower and like gain levels and upgrade stats and such, and like can save your progress.
That's interesting.
Yeah, like it sounds cool, and like it would have like given even more replay value and made it an even more cool, unique game. But I don't know.
Sounds to me like it should have been a Game Boy Advance game. Like scale down the sprites and like make it just a little side-scrolling shooter. Like I'm thinking of like when they're a Gradius and like a couple games like that.
Yeah, but it would have been worse.
Okay,
it would have been a lot worse.
All right. Fair enough.
Yeah, I'm happy that we have like such a faithful port on the Switch that's like arcade perfect. I'm sad we don't have like the PlayStation 1 extra feature, because I think it would have been cool and made it even more fun to play. It got a few other home ports for like anthologies, like Psycho collections and such.
Gotcha. PlayStation
2, I don't know. But it's a NintenGem because it's on the Nintendo Switch eShop now. Yay. And you should you at least look for it and read the blurb for yourself. It just is absurd. It's silly. It's so much. It's funny.
How recently did this join the NintenGem crew?
It was released on the Switch in 2018.
Oh snap! So this isn't a recent development by any means.
Not at all. And I guess I would close out maybe with like the anecdote of why the hell I've been playing it. My roommate, the same one featured in art school and such. If you want to go back and listen to that. Good episode. He was reminiscing about his childhood and this PlayStation 1 game that he could not remember. He said it was like it was like a shoot 'em up sort of. He was playing as a purple guy throwing spears. It was nothing to go on. I'd never heard of this game before.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
And he recalled a centipede monster, and the cover was like maybe purple and orange. This is like one of the first video games he ever played.
Yeah.
Like one of the, like 2-3 years old, one of those kinds of memories. And he did, oh my god, the thing you do when you don't know what else to do, and he found a list of every single PlayStation 1 game.
Ouch.
And just started scrolling.
He did it?
No, he didn't. I did it. He did that and got like up to a point and accidentally like hit the back button on his browser or whatever and like lost his place. But through my knowledge, my library of Alexandria in my brain, I swiftly found it on the internet, and I found this game and I thought it looked cool. And so we played it together. I helped him jog his memory and relive his childhood, and now we have...
You're basically a hero.
I am a hero, not even basically. And now it belongs in the NintenGems Hall of Fame. For better, for worse.
Hooray!
Here we are. What an episode, folks.
We made it. And that was just a Jimmy episode, man.
Who's Jimmy?
Jimmy. Yeah, because Famicom Detective Club, you might hate it, you might love it. And Cell Divide, you might hate it, you might hate it.
Yeah, the options are truly endless. But that's part of the podcast.
It is. As you said in the beginning, I feel like we've been pretty heavy on Mario and DK and Pokemon, and it's nice to divert the spotlight from the heavy hitters every once in a while and kind of...
Even if it's a pretty heavy diversion from the spotlight.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was excited to talk about this one. I think it's an interesting little speck of gaming history.
Absolutely.
Same for Famicom Detective Club.
For sure. And don't worry, I am actively playing The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild at the moment.
Oh.
You know.
Now that's obscure.
Yo, never heard of it.
Not even once.
But to be honest, this is only my second playthrough ever.
Really?
Yeah. I've only played it the once and loved it and was scared to try again. So
are you saying that this might be our Nintendo Classic, I don't know, of the next episode? Possibly, maybe?
It'll be something. But yeah, we'll be discussing it soon.
Cool.
All right, should we get out of here? I think that means that I need to tell you guys to check out Instagram and Facebook. Make sure you follow us because you're missing some good content, especially Instagram. We're pretty hot.
Oh yeah, super hot.
make sure that you subscribe on the platform that you're listening to us on right now.
Yeah, you can follow my musical ventures at weave.bandcamp.com.